The world is marking Indigenous Peoples Day. It was first designated by the United Nations 30 years ago, and it's an opportunity to raise awareness about the needs of countless global communities who still live on their ancestral lands. And with me now to talk more about some of the issues facing Indigenous people from around the world is Chase Ironeyes. He is Executive Director of the Sacred Defense Fund and joins us now from Puerto Rico. Welcome to the show, sir. Thank you so much for being with us. Indigenous people, thank you. Indigenous peoples make up about 6% of the global population and are nearly 3 times as likely to be living in extreme poverty compared to their non-Indigenous counterparts. Why is that, and what are some of the key characteristics of an Indigenous economy?
Thank you for that. Indigenous nations, Indigenous people are denied our nationhood in the legal sense of that word. So when it comes to the real sources of all economic value, we're talking land, water, critical earth minerals. These quote-unquote resources, according to non-Indigenous worldviews, have been expropriated from Indigenous nations, and Indigenous nations have been made to suffer. They've been economically, legally, and politically terrorized and subjugated. So this would account for why things are the way they are like in the United States, they're known as Indian reservations. In Canada, they're known as reserves. But this tribal reservation system is not working for Native people, for Native Americans, for the Indigenous peoples of the world. We're constantly having to contend with corporate, colonial, extractive apparatus systems that are designed to benefit the private corporation over and against any and all conceivable rights, privileges, and immunities of the Indigenous nations. Where I grew up on the Standing Rock Nation, American infrastructure projects were put in an aggressive and illegal manner, and almost 1,000 people were arrested, including myself, to assert and defend the territorial sovereign integrity of the Sioux Nation. In what is called the United States, there are more than 500 Indigenous nations, tribal nations. As your program stated earlier, there's more than 4,000 Indigenous languages. So we are being held in captivity, but nobody understands it really much anymore. It's been 90 years in the United States alone. 1934 was the last time the United States took a critical and analytical look at why things are the way they are and what is the nature, source, and efficacy of American policy on Indian reservations, on tribal nations. So we're just now coming out of a long, dark age, an end of the world for Indigenous nations. And to celebrate the World Day of Indigenous Peoples means that we are seeking truth. We are seeking a healing, a reconciliation, and reparations. But sometimes reparations is not money. It's not currency to us. It's land back, it's clean water, it's our languages and ceremonies revitalized. And we want occupying governments like the United States to assist us in that process.
Yeah, there is certainly a troubled history with the U.S. and this population. Sir, can you help explain the importance of recognizing and understanding the intrinsic value of the economic contributions of Native American population?
Yeah, that's Native nations. First of all, this whole hemisphere was once Indigenous land, but now, and I use the United States as a reference point because this is where I grew up. This is what I was born into. Native people sit on less than 5% of their former land holdings, but they sit on top of more than 20% of all critical rare earth minerals and other resources that are important for the kind of technology and economy that we have inherited from the last 2 centuries, since the industrial age And indigenous nations are not, our consent is not sought, nor are we consulted when it's our resources that are being developed. It's indigenous resources that are providing the great mass of wealth for all of America, but mostly that top 1% of corporations. And Native people, nobody wants to see Native people living in poverty anymore. So we don't want to be seen as poor people. We don't want to be seen as receiving handouts. We want to empower ourselves. And to this end, we're recreating redefining what poverty is to us, what progress is to us, and what it means for us to succeed in the 21st century world today.
Sir, only about 30 seconds left, but I want to touch on this because there has been progress made despite a troubling sort of history. So how has the narrative of entrepreneurship among this particular group evolved? It used to be highly land and nature centric, but how much growth has there been in owning small businesses, for example?
Yes, Native people are responsible. Look at the state that I live in, South Dakota. We contribute probably $1 billion to one town collectively as tribal nations. As the Oglala Lakota Nation, we contribute $250 million to the border town of Rapid City, South Dakota. Now, nationwide, Native American gaming alone is worth $32 billion. We're going to continue to grow and increase our power because we no longer want to settle for increased Native representation. We want power and we want privilege, and we have the economic resources to do that. We should not be in the situation that we're in today, but there's a lot to unpack there, and it would be like a semester's course of work. But I want to thank you for having me today.
Yeah, it is definitely an important discussion to have, and we're so happy to have you on. Chase Iron Eyes, thank you so much.
Thank you.